Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He's a member of the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees, and he serves as national co-chair of President Biden's re-election campaign, which is up and running now.
Up and running. Well, Senator, thank you for being with us. Mika, very excited about the president of South Korea singing American Pie.
I liked it.
Your comments on that?
That was a wonderful state dinner last night, and President Yoon showed his agility as a diplomat and as a national leader. President Biden didn't just give him a signed guitar from Don McLean for his wonderful rendition of part of American Pie. They also signed an understanding about America standing by South Korea in the face of North Korea's increasing nuclear threats. So President Biden's committed to deploy a nuclear-armed submarine that will visit South Korea, first time in many years. This was the first head of state visit by a South Korean leader in 12 years. And it was just a reminder of how deep and strong this 70-year-old close partnership, this alliance is between the United States and South Korea. South Korean companies have recently announced billions of dollars of new investment in the United States, some of it really caused by the Inflation Reduction Act. And it was a good platform for our president, Joe Biden, to remind the American people that between the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and so many other bills he signed into law in the last 2 years, we're restarting American manufacturing, we're rebuilding our infrastructure, we're reducing prescription drug prices, we're dealing with mental health and background checks. President Biden has a very strong platform to run on for re-election. And today, as President Yoon of South Korea addresses a joint session of Congress, we'll also be reminded he has strengthened our important network of alliances around the world. He organized the Western world standing up to Russia's brutal aggression in Ukraine. And something that sometimes goes overlooked is how strongly President Biden has led pulling together our allies like Japan and South Korea, delivering the groundwork for a strong response to China's challenge in the Indo-Pacific.
Senator, one of the biggest challenges the United States faces is with its ally, Ukraine, and the war against Russia. Supposedly, we hear repeatedly, there is going to be a new offensive that the Ukrainian army is going to undertake within weeks, perhaps days. Does it concern you that Ukraine has suffered such enormous casualty losses, as have the Russians, perhaps even more so than the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians are looking at a smaller military manpower pool? What happens if they run out of eligible young men to fight the war?
You raise a great question. I'll remind you just a casual saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And for the first year of this war, that has certainly been true on the field. Russia's been fielding folks they've forcibly conscripted from prisons or who they've recruited from other countries, facing Ukrainians who were determined, capable, passionate volunteers. But as you point out, the difference in population is vast. And we are providing, our European partners and allies are providing critical training to Ukrainian troops, critical resupply. We're now getting tanks into the field in addition to lots of armored personnel carriers that in combination should make possible a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive this spring. But if this turns into a long, grinding conflict over several years, even though the Russian troops are dispirited, disorganized, and not well motivated or led, they could in the end be successful. So we need to continue our robust support for Ukraine in the hopes, in the expectation that they'll be successful this spring.
Senator, perhaps the biggest domestic challenge right now is the looming fight over the debt ceiling. We heard finally from the House Republicans with their budget this week, though scant on some details. But Speaker McCarthy says that this should be the first step towards real negotiations with the White House on this matter. But we know, of course, the White House doesn't want to negotiate in the debt ceiling. They say, this is just something that should be passed. It's separate. So we're in a real impasse here. Is there any role that the Senate can play as the clock really starts to tick towards that deadline?
The Senate is playing the role that it can and should play here. Yesterday, we had a number of appropriations hearings where Democrats and Republicans questioned members of the cabinet about President Biden's budget. That's the process that we should be going through. Regular order to take up, discuss, debate, and pass bills that approve the spending for this coming fiscal year. As you know all too well, we can't default on our debt. If we do, the cost for average Americans, for folks watching this show, would be crushing. We'd be thrown into recession. Every one of us who pays credit card bills or mortgages or student loans would see our interest rates go up, and our country would be under a cloud in terms of our ability to borrow on the world stage or our economic strength. We should deal with our deficit. We should deal with our spending plans. And President Biden has said, of course, he will meet with and negotiate with Speaker McCarthy on that matter. But he shouldn't do it as a result of hostage taking or at the point of a gun. Last point, I hope folks will look into the consequences of what Speaker McCarthy narrowly passed by just 2 votes yesterday afternoon. It would impose cuts that none of us want to support. It would result, if fully implemented, in laying off 30,000 state and local police officers. It would cause nearly 1 million low-income seniors to lose access to Meals on Wheels, and I could go on and on. These are social and domestic spending cuts I can't imagine Americans supporting.
Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. We appreciate it.